Hey guys, Duncan here again. I want to talk about the Georgia Guidestones, but before we do, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, like the videos, comment in the box below, and hit that bell for notifications. So with that being said, let's talk about the Georgia Guidestones. Here we go.
We're out here today at the Georgia Guidestones in Elberton, Georgia. It's about 70 miles outside of Atlanta. And as you can see here, it's a 17-foot tall, strange granite monument that has 10 guidelines printed on it or etched into it about what to do after the shit hits the fan, as it were, and the apocalypse comes. We're going to take a short tour of the Guidestones today. We're going to talk a little bit about its history, and we're going to show you just the area around here, and also some of the vandalism that's been done on the Guidestones in the past 2 years. We'll take a walking tour of that as well. They were built in the late 1970s, around about 1979, 1980. The project was funded and created by a man who went by the name R.C. Christian. That was his pseudonym. R.C. Christian's an interesting fellow because apparently he has some sort of Cold War fears, nuclear hang-up, perhaps, that's made him decide that he wants to create, well, what is...
Okay, I just want to stop right there. Some people do believe that this is also a guideline as to how to maintain a successful or how to maintain a nation. So he's talking about this guy because he's some freak that's worried about Cold War in the 80s and 70s. He created this Guidestones, but it's not. It's just because he was afraid of this doesn't mean the simple fact that the message is there. And the message is simple, that if you want a successful nation, these are the 10 guides to how to do it. So let's continue.
It is essentially a giant Rosetta Stone. Though it does have these 10 guidelines on it, I think what is as important as that is the fact that they're printed in the 8 most popular modern languages. No one knows exactly who R.C. Christian was, but it's known that he was backed up by a small group of men, and that he was maybe a level of about $250,000 to $300,000. This is the English face of the Georgia Guidestones, and of course the easiest way for you to get a good reading on what the different guidelines are that R.C. Christian laid out for his monument. The first one here at the top is the one that is the most controversial. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. This is a real sticking point for a lot of the folks that research this monument.
It's a sticking point because when you're dealing with the 500, or when you're dealing with a population limit like that, then you start having to talk about the depopulation of America. And then when you're dealing with this number, 500 billion, think about America currently has 341 million. So as that number gets larger, we have to start thinking of ways to eliminate people. Whether that be abortion, war, sickness, you can come up with addictions, lifestyles, you name it. As you look around, especially today, you can see more and more of the Agenda 21 movement. You can see more and more of the depopulation of America, the population control. So that's the specifics behind why you want to see this video, why you want to share this video, and why you want to inform people about the Guidestones. But let's continue.
Reminds us of people like Thomas Malthus, who used to say that the population was just going to grow and grow, and that we were all basically a cancer on the earth. And I think, in fact, cancer on the earth is down here on the 10th guideline. So that's caused a lot of controversy over the stones, and we'll go through some of the other ones in a minute, but I mean, as an example of this controversy, you can see that the face is heavily damaged. And this staining actually comes from epoxy that was thrown, a bucket actually of epoxy that was thrown up here on this face of the stone. And if you look at the language, it's very reminiscent of what I would define as like late 1970s Ted Turner environmentalism. It's got very much that kind of quality to it. And lots of mentions of nature. Like I said, it seems to capture that environmentalist spirit very well. It's interesting that the third guideline here, it says unite humanity with a new living language. As I said before, they serve as sort of a Rosetta Stone.
This is where a lot of people believe it's a liberal monument that's designed to get people ready for the New World Order, talking about a world population, talking about a world language, talking about humanity and not being a cancer on the planet. These are all a globalistic ideas. This is why these guides, these ideas, are typically loved by the left. You're talking about population control, you're talking abortion, you're talking all these other things that the liberals are well known for. Okay, so let's continue.
More than anything else. The Georgia Guidestones Monument, which is owned by Elbert County, was dedicated March 22nd, 1980, and since has remained a source of mystery and intrigue to its numerous visitors and those who learn of it from afar. Well, I think that's a good way to segue into talking a little bit about some of the astronomical alignments that you'll find in the Georgia Guidestones. If you look here, you'll see that there's what they call the male slot here along the middle of the central pillar. That's meant to mark the equinox and the solstices. You can observe them rising through that hole in the morning on those days of the year. And I think that has to do with the way the angles are cut going into the male slot. So you can line yourself up on one side or the other to see the sunrise. There's also, if you look up into the capstone, you'll see a vertical hole that tracks the North Star, the movement of the North Star each day of the year. So any day of the year you can observe the North Star through the Georgia Guidestones. Those are just a few of the astronomical alignments that you'll find here on the stones. And once again, it's almost like a Swiss Army knife for the people of the future, right? You can translate the languages of the past if they've fallen into disuse or if there are no written records left. You can track the equinoxes. You can know when the seasons are, exactly when the seasons are changing. Follow the course of the stars. Things that men have been doing for thousands and thousands of years, and that we often forget in our modern society. And I think the Guidestones are a great reminder of these things, and also a great example of the kinds of things ancient people would do when they would build these megalithic structures. They're not always maybe as grandiose as you might think, but people can do great things even within their own means. And I think...
Now, these Guidestones have also been linked to some rituals, some cult rituals. They've been linked to different events when all the right when the right equinoxes all line up. I mean, these Guidestones have a dark history, right along with the Bohemian Society and a lot of those other satanic-like cults.
I think R.C. Christian's monument here is a great example of that. Let's walk around a little and look at the flagstone for a moment. So this is the flagstone for the monument, and it does a good job of just explaining the different astronomical alignments, as well as telling you what different languages, if you don't already know, are printed on the different stones. They also translate the message on the capstone. Let these be guidestones to an age of reason. Also explains the physical size of the monument, and has a few interesting places over here. If you look, there's a mention of a time capsule here on the flagstone. That's actually never been laid. The idea was that the people of Elberton would come together, or perhaps the school children of Elberton would come together and lay a time capsule here at some point, and it just never has happened. So a lot of times people will come and visit the monument and think that there's another whole other layer of the mystery about this time capsule because as you can see, the text is just sort of left blank at the end of the line. So there's actually nothing under this flagstone, well, at least nothing that I know of. But that hasn't kept treasure hunters and conspiracy theorists from coming out here and taking their shovels to the flagstone. If you look all the way around, you can see that the outer edge of this flagstone is clearly visible almost all the way around. If you had come out here 2 or 3 years ago, this flagstone would have seemed to sit in the ground almost. You wouldn't have been able to hardly see any of the edges of it. The monument was completely pristine and untouched up until just after the election of Barack Obama in November of 2008. And apparently the people who have it out for this monument, who believe that it somehow represents a Malthusian New World Order, their rage bubbled up right after the Obama election, as it often does after any election, whether it be a Democrat or a Republican. And we saw the damage with the epoxy to the side of the English face, which I talked a little bit about earlier. And if you'd come around here, there's also been graffiti, which you can see sort of evidence of where it's been covered up all over the guide stones. And this started off very typical sort of anti-New World Order rhetoric and slogans, much like you would see in the films of Alex Jones and others. In fact, many of the quotes graffitied on the guide stones at the time came directly from the Alex Jones film Endgame, which we also happen to publish here at Disinformation. It's been this sort of thing basically since 2008, and it's only stopped since they've taken the time and money to clean up the guide stones. And they've also, if you look just down over the parking lot across there, you'll see.
Love how he takes a shot at the Alex Jones people, even though Alex Jones has been proven to be right more times than not. He may sometimes get carried away on his thinking, but you know what? His thoughts, his news has been true more times than not. And I rely on his news. I trust in it, I hear it, I listen. I love the Alex Jones Show. I advise other people to go check it out. He speaks the truth, and he makes it the reason, and you can actually follow the reason, and he backs it up. Unlike some of these media sites that just speak without any kind of factual evidence, they just speak on their own biased opinions. That's the simple thing. So, let's continue.
See the cameras that they've set up, and it says they're always on, so apparently the police have to take a much closer look at the monument now and sort of keep an eye on it. Why Elberton? Why build this strange monument here out in the middle of nowhere in eastern Georgia? We're not too far from South Carolina here. We're in the very deep South, and these sorts of ideas, well, you just really don't hear them kicked around in these kinds of neighborhoods. Elberton is the, quote, granite capital of the world. More granite monuments are produced here than I think in any other city anywhere in the world. I think that's probably had a lot to do with why R.C. Christian chose this location, chose this area. Because remember, he's on a budget. He's not a Rothschild or a Rockefeller. He doesn't have infinite resources. So he's got to go to where the granite is. And if we look at the size of these stones, it would be very hard to transport them very far. So the quarry is literally, the pyramid quarry where they were built is literally just 10 miles away. And even the process of moving them just from the quarry to here was very difficult. So you can see why, just for practical reasons, you'd end up in a place like Elberton. Now, many people theorize that there are perhaps some ley lines, or that this was the center of Indian territory, or something like that back in the day, or maybe it's on the 33rd degree parallel. We are actually fairly close to the 33rd degree parallel here, but before you get too excited, just know that R.C. Christian was given 3 sites to choose from here in Elberton, 3 different locations where he could put his stones. And this is the one that he chose. It was based on what real estate was available at the time, not necessarily presence of any ley lines or telluric currents or anything like that. Although you do feel a little weird energy when you're out here sometimes. Who was this man of mystery? Nobody really knows who he was. There are anecdotal stories that he said his mother came from Georgia, and that was perhaps why he chose to build the monument here. He publishes his book, Common Sense Renewed, out of a publishing company in Iowa, so I've often wondered perhaps he's from there. But more importantly than where he's from is, what does he represent? You know, is he perhaps a Rosicrucian, a member of something like the AMORC, or another modern incarnation of the Rosicrucians? In case you don't know who the Rosicrucians were, they were this sort of 17th century esoteric fraternity. They're the forerunners of Freemasonry. They're the first secret society, right? And actually, it's not even known whether they even existed at first. They announced themselves through manifestos printed in Germany in around about 1608. And they called for the greater reformation of the whole wide world, the inauguration of the Age of Reason that R.C. Christian keeps talking about in his monument. And it's funny that he picked that name, right? Because the central mythical figure of the Rosicrucian story is Christian Rosencrantz. We see how much similarity there is between the name R.C. Christian and Christian Rosencrantz. This could, in fact, just be a coincidence. It could be that Robert Christian or R.C. Christian just chose this name by coincidence or just in an arbitrary way. He often signs his name, in fact, Robert Christian, not R.C. Christian. But I personally, I do believe that he probably was a member of a Rosicrucian or other New Agey sort of fraternity of men.
Okay, so now this dude's contradicting himself. He says that the creator of it is probably part of this Rosiferian cult. But earlier he talks about how the site was just merely chosen by real estate. Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. Just because there was 3 site locations, I'd be wondering where the other 3 sites are. Okay, the other 2 sites, because as he put it, maybe this site was chosen because it was the closest available site to 33rd degree parallel, which, if you know, the 33 degrees is basically a 33 and a third Freemason is one of the highest levels, and that's where you have to basically be inside the elite to get there. You're part of the deep, the Illuminati. So this guy's talking about how this dude, who obviously changed his name to fill some prophecy, and he built this monument that's got a complete world population control, one world agenda message, and it's built near the 33rd and degree parallel, like much of the Masonic monuments in this country. So let's finish this, and let's finish the video.
But they probably weren't very big or very powerful. Like I said, this is about a $300,000 project. Let's talk a little bit about what the Guidestones mean. My friend Austin Gandy, he co-hosts the Disinformation podcast with me. He calls them a prison of meaning, and I thought that was a perfect analogy for what they are. You know, it's sort of like in The Empire Strikes Back. You know, Luke looks into the cave or the dark area, and he says to Yoda, you know, what's in there? You know, and what does Yoda say? He says, of course, only what you take with you. The Guidestones are very much the same way. I mean, people bring with them the meaning that they want to have before they get here. Oftentimes, they come here to protest, or they come here to see what they think is a great or terrible thing. You know, either way. It's very strange. There are few people that, though, I find that have a very positive view of the Guidestones, which I do. Building a monument like this was a wonderful way for a man to leave something behind that would really last, and something that would make a positive message about where the world is going, and make a statement about what's wrong with the world now in a lot of ways. If the Guidestones survive, if they're not pulled down by some redneck with his Hemi, I hope they go on to be a historical monument here in Georgia. I think they should be classed as a historical monument. Perhaps one of the very first historical monuments that will mark the period of the late Cold War, the early 80s, the early Reagan years, the last nuclear scare, basically.
See, now, again, there you go with your political biasism, talking about rednecks tearing down a monument that is completely lathered in killing off humanity, population control, Agenda 21. And it's not just rednecks with a Hemi that would be ripping that down. Any conservative American that believes in the people should be ripping that down. Anybody that believes that the people have the right to live in this country should be ripping that down. And here we have this message where this obviously young college liberal is already trying to protect this monument through history, through the Historical Society, through the Monuments Society in America. And the reason they're trying to protect that is because they don't want us to rip that monument down like many of them are ripping down our Civil War monuments. Okay, keep that in mind. That's the one thing I've noticed is this guy in this channel, disinformation seems to be completely a liberal, one-sided message. Very biased.
And as I've said many times before, they're more than anything a monument to our Cold War fears and a stark reminder of the fact that we have the power in our hands to completely destroy.
You see the pictures of the harp trails? Isn't it ironic that they'd be talking about guide stones and killing population when you got clearly fake clouds up here? Just saying.
Destroy each other. And we can choose to do that or we can choose not to. Hopefully these guide stones will never have to be used for the reason that they were designed. And hopefully they can just sort of stand here as a reminder of where we could go and not where we are.
Well, anyway, that's the information on the guide stones. I think it's more of where we're going now, where the left is trying to push us. We need to be aware of these guide stones because they lay out the exact plan that the liberal left is attempting. They lay out the plan for Agenda 21, and it lays out the reasoning behind it as well. So, if you guys enjoyed the message, please subscribe to the channel, like the videos, comment in the box below, and hit that bell for notifications. Hope you guys liked it. Peace. Duncan out.